Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Young Man and the Three. Today, obviously, our good man Tommy is here with us, and we're also joined by one of the very best shooters in the association, Duncan Robinson. Welcome, Duncan.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the nod, especially coming from you. That means a lot.
Game recognized game.
I felt like you could have used another descriptor other than just one of the best shooters, but I'll take that.
He gets that a lot.
I'll take my flowers. I just want to say how spectacular this venue is that we're coming from. This is a fantastic establishment.
His first time here. So Cam, just for context, Cam, since the last, I would say 3 or 4 months, has been coming into the studio daily.
This is the hideaway?
This is the hideaway.
Almost daily to hit the simulator, which JJ has graciously blessed him to do, and he does not say yes to everybody.
Yeah, thank you, JJ, even though there's some Carolina golf bag and golf clubs.
But this is somehow your first time in here. What are your thoughts?
First time. I took some cuts on the simulators. Is that going to be problematic, or do you think I get?
I mean, we might have to cut this. We'll see. We'll see what he says.
No, this place is special, though. Everything really you'd ever want.
Yeah,
I'm jealous that you have it in your backyard.
Really cool. Well, you get the weather of Miami, and I get a simulator. So
that's exactly right. We're taping this 6:20 p.m. Thursday, February 6th. Trade deadline was 3 hours ago. Let's start on Saturday, because I talked to you probably the next day. I probably talked to both of you guys the next day because it was late. And we talked with Trey and a couple other guys earlier this week about the overall thoughts on the deal itself. But like your initial reactions to something that big happening in general, and then also happening at like 12:30 at night.
Yeah, we were in San Antonio. And yeah, I think it was at least 12:30 there. So it might've been, later East Coast time. I thought it was fake for sure. I mean, everyone's kind of had their own version of like, Sham's account got hacked or they're trolling or whatever. But I immediately like screenshot it, sent it to like 4 people like, is this real? Is this real? And then of course he follows up with yeah, it's real. And then you just go through like a 45-minute to an hour of just unpacking like, how could this happen? How did this happen? And I still think, rightfully so, there's a lot of people still trying to wrap their mind around it, to be honest. I mean, to move on from a player 25 years old who's whatever, top 3, 4, whatever you want to call it, in the league is pretty crazy.
Yeah, same situation here. As we were boarding the plane, leaving Houston, and I don't know who saw it first. It was kind of like everybody saw it at the same time. Everybody gets the alert. Everybody, is like, whoa, 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 whoa. Obviously, first thought is it's fake. It's literally the same situation across the league. Yeah. We were just sitting in a plane. But yeah, everybody's still trying to wrap their heads around it and figure out, what actually went on behind the scenes for this. It seemed like it just happened so quick. There's no shopping around. It just seemed very quick and direct. So maybe someday we'll get a little more inside scoop on what was really going on.
Yeah, I mean everybody like kind of speculating as to what must have happened for it to get to that point.
Yeah.
We were, as I mentioned, we were in San Antonio and there was a group of us, on the rooftop of the hotel, just like hanging after the game. It was like Kev, AB, maybe one other, Terry ended up showing up and Haywood, and everybody was like coming to the table with their own theories of like what must have happened. Like, oh, he, got into it with Nico, or he came back, it was 305 pounds, or, whatever it was, like, because there almost has to be something, or at least feel like there's something, for a move like that to be made in that moment too. Like, there was no, like you said, like there's no rumors of it getting shopped or canvassing the league or going through what you think is the due diligence of trading a player like that. And it just happened what felt like on a whim, really.
Yeah. If you were to look at like, if we were to have this conversation a week ago and say, who are the untouchables in the league? Like, who is definitely not getting traded? 99% likely would be on that list.
Who's on that list for you? Maybe nobody.
Right now?
Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody, but if I were to make a list right now,
if you were to make it last Friday,
I would say probably Luka would have been on it, but Jokic, Wembanyama, and
Shea for sure.
I
would say Shea for sure.
Yeah.
Giannis?
I don't think so. I wouldn't say.
I think there's also, without having asked out like publicly, right?
Right.
I see a scenario where Giannis ends up getting traded. Obviously, if it's just, I'm not like speculating this so everybody can relax, but like, if he wants to be in a bigger market or whatever it is, right? Like, I think everybody could see that scenario, but like Luka was, and what we all thought would be forever be like the face of that franchise. And I think we always talk about how this is a business, right? Like, there's also a serious business implication of trading away. I mean, you see people canceling, season tickets. You see like a rioting of fans, like understandably. Jason, he was one of the first people I texted. I was like, how are you, like, help me unpack this. Like, how are you feeling? Like, what's the pulse of like Mavs Nation? And that was his first take of like, forget the competitive, like we think we got better. Like, throw that out the window. Like, you just traded away people's idols, like little kid, like the whole thing. I mean, marketing, if you want to just talk business, like what that marketing runway looks like for the next 10 years, you have it on lock. It's Luka Doncic. Like, he's the guy and always will be. I'm not sitting here criticizing. Everyone has their reasons, but those are just the things that I thought of, when it happened.
Do you feel like being a professional athlete, you still are able to keep yourself in touch with that feeling that fans have? Because the outpouring of emotion around this is something I can't remember from any other. There's been a lot of NBA crazy moves and everything like that, but I can't remember there's the coffin, there's the people outside the arena, obviously everybody online. This does feel like, shock aside, I think you're completely right, and we have it firsthand with Jason, but there are anyone who has ever been a Dallas Mavericks fan, seems like they all have the same opinion on this. And I'm kind of curious, like, because you guys have been so, this happened to you a couple years ago. We talk about it all the time, but it was like he gets traded in the middle of the night from a place that he loves. Like, when this happens, do you feel like you can still kind of put yourself in the fans' position?
To an extent, yeah. But I do think you have a valid point. Like, being a part of it changes your perspective dramatically on the operation of professional sports. And, it comes along with you yourself being moved, or people that you really cared about as teammates, some of your good friends, and you just see them like one day and then the next day, boom, they're gone. You like, not even a goodbye. Like, they're literally across the country playing for a different team or in a different jersey. So you get a little removed from it. I think we can, kind of force that perspective and understand it. But I think we have, being in the business, definitely see it a lot differently.
Yeah, I think when you live and exist in it, I feel you're more in tune with the human aspect of the business than you would be, obviously, if you're a fan. I think as players, I think generally people, like we as players, consider fans though, and understand the implications. Like, I've heard sound bites of like guys like Tatum talking about, like, I play on the road in Charlotte because, there's some kid coming who's never get to see me play, right? Like, so I think generally the league does a good job of prioritizing fans, because I think we all understand that's a lot of what's driving the business. I think what can harden some players is being on the other side of bad fan interactions. And we've obviously seen our fair share of that too, whether it be, like Isaiah Thomas going up in the stands, or, all this stuff with Russ over the years. So I think there's examples on both sides of it. I understand as players how you can get hardened, because like you said, you get a teammate, a friend, somebody moved overnight. You've obviously been traded. You know what that feels like. And the other thing with that too is, like, we talk about the deadline. When you get moved, and obviously you can speak to this, like, that's just a moment a lot of times for a fan. Obviously, you don't get to watch that person wear that jersey anymore, but there's an unpacking of that for the player that exists long beyond that moment, that tweet, that viral moment. Whereas there's an implication of your future, your play, your everything. Like, you're moving to a new city, you got a family, kids in school, like all these things that don't necessarily get considered enough, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's a nuanced situation. But from, I can understand how this is brutal on a lot of fans. And this is Anthony Davis is a great player. It's not like Dallas is, you know what I mean? It's not like they just got
10-time All-Star.
And nobody's talking about it.
5-time
Nobody's talking about it. But
yeah.
Nobody's talking about it because of how much Luka meant to that city.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, Definitely. It's going to shake the Dallas fan base. Like, it's going to be awkward in that arena for sure.
I mean, I wonder, and they did the press conferences afterwards and everything like that, and it's probably not a thing they're going to say publicly for sort of obvious reasons. I wonder if some of the decision makers in Dallas underestimated that, where they were basically like, you can make an argument. I don't think it would be an argument I would make, but there's a basketball reason to do this. You're trading for Anthony Davis. You're building around your defense. You're building around bigs like this. But the emotional tie is a thing that, like, you kind of just got to be in the streets with the people to get it. And if you're not, if they had it back, I'm not sure they would do anything differently, but maybe they would have. Although I don't know.
It's way they completely ignored that though. Like, that's probably would be one of the first things you think of.
Is just the fan reaction. Yeah.
There's no way they just completely just wrote that off, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's hard.
I think the Cuban dynamic too is interesting. Yeah. Obviously, like no longer majority share, and I've always imagined that he still had his fair share of like involvement. But like the quotes came out of like him talking about, I'd sooner divorce my wife than trade Luka. So, I wonder like where he was left in all that. Obviously, I'm sure someone's probably gotten a soundbite from him, or maybe they haven't post trade, but that must have like shook everything up too. I mean,
so you have been on the other side of many Luka, unfortunately, playoff moments, and it's been a thing where
just like a string, just like a quick
you've seen him. You've seen this. You've seen angry, pissed off Luka in action.
Yeah.
Like, what are you expecting from that first game back in Dallas?
He's going to be locked in for sure. I know that. I don't quite know when that game's going to be, but
I think it's coming up. I think it's in February. I think it's like February 28th.
This is going to be a huge game. Get your popcorn ready. He's going to be locked in. It's going to be just highly personal, and he's going to bring everything he has for sure that game. But I just think in general, like, I think at the end of the day, he is a competitor. Like you said, I might have seen angry Luke. I saw a competitive version. You saw him in that mode. Those playoffs we played him, the playoffs last year. And that's probably what makes him that good, is that he can elevate a team in the playoffs. That's like a huge part of that value that he has. Yeah, he puts up stats. He does this, he does that, but he can go out there and win you playoff games. So again, that kind of adds to the mystery of the situation, but I'm looking forward to that one. My TV will be on.
That's gonna be a crazy one. Is that in LA or is it?
I think it's in Dallas.
Back in Dallas.
You know who's Adam Silver has to be over the moon about the last. Yeah. This is Super Bowl week. Yep. This is Thursday of Super Bowl week of probably what's going to be one of the highest rated Super Bowls ever. And for the last 4 days, the news has been people who don't even follow the NBA are talking about this trade.
NBA. It was a crazy deadline. And just probably 3-4 weeks ago, people were saying like, "Oh, it's just such a weak deadline. Like, it's no entertainment."
3-4 weeks ago, they're just talking about him.
I'm gonna be the guy. I'm gonna be the one guy.
Every team's modeling out. Every team's being like, "Where's Cam going?"
Be the guy traded. Meanwhile,
here you are, man.
Meanwhile, we're in Brooklyn taping this.
I texted Tommy 2 days ago that he was planning this. I was like, "So what if Cam gets traded?" I was like, well, first, what if I get traded? Because every deadline I'm in the mix all the time. But I was like, what if he gets traded? Like, I guess cross that bridge when we come to it.
Do you have what are your feelings around the deadline as a player? Are you like, whatever happens? Are you thinking about it? How are you?
At this point, I don't want to say unfazed, because definitely not unfazed, but I've developed a tolerance for the noise over time. I mean, I also think this was a year, I think in prior years, there were all sorts of, rumors, deals that were going to happen. And the other thing with Miami is, we've been like in the mix for a star for a long time. So early on in my career, I was like kind of getting thrown in as a, pot sweetener, because I was on a minimum contract and had outplayed it at that point. And then later on in my career, it was more of like a salary match situation. So I've been on both sides of that. But yeah, I mean, at this point, like, I think you learn how to differentiate between what's noise, what's signal, like what actually has legitimacy. And then you also kind of choose, like, what are you going to give credence to? What relationships in your life actually are coming to the table with substance, whether it be your agent or be like a front office or a media person that you like rely upon and with actual legitimate information. So at this point, like I'm not as frantic or as bothered by it. But like, for example, this year, we were joking about it, but like you were up in the mix for weeks now.
For months. I've been in the mix since Mikal got traded, I think is when rumors started swirling around. That was in June. So I've been every phone call from my agent since then is like, is this a moment? Is this, you know what I mean? I'm serious. I've been dealing with it for a long time to the point where it's just like numbing almost.
Yeah,
like, it's just like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like you said, I cannot invest energy into that. You know what I mean? It's just, it's not good. It's not healthy. It's not the right way to go about it. For me, it was just like that'll take care of itself. I'm just going to worry about what I have in front of me. Yeah.
You're also in a great spot. You earned this spot, but you're in a situation where you would be traded for. Whereas like, I always like to differentiate. There's a lot of players that get thrown into deals and they're just kind of whatever salary situation, circumstance. You're actually getting traded for in an attempt to bolster a roster, create more depth, or bring in somebody that's going to put them over the top. So I think that's obviously a perspective that, that's now twice that you've been traded for. The KD one was tricky because it was obviously such a blockbuster deal, but nonetheless, like you were a big part of that deal coming back for Brooklyn, of course, too.
So for the people listening, the difference is when you get thrown in and this might be, at the sake of being too obvious, but everything in the NBA is about opportunity. That's it. NBA is purely about opportunity and the circumstances that you're kind of given and thrown into and everything that surrounds that. So like for you coming into Miami was probably just a great place to start your career.
Yeah, for sure.
For me, Phoenix, the situation that it was when I got there was a great place, great coaching staff, great teammates to start my career. And so when a team trades for you, then they are much more heavily invested in you. And they're more willing to ride with you through the ups and downs, get you acclimated as quick as possible, and give you those opportunities that you can further develop your career. So a lot of people get, just the natural course of NBA careers. Not everybody can always play. And some people are thrown around here and thrown around there. And when you're put in a position where you don't have opportunities is when things become a lot more difficult.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's examples of really good players too that have just been, Dennis is a good example of this trade line. Like Dennis is a really good player. He had a great start to the year with you guys.
Great.
And it's a combination of his salary sort of like making sense to move and being easy to kind of, partner with other salaries for a bigger player. Obviously, in this case, the Jimmy situation. But, you see him, I think he's been on 4 teams now in the last 24 hours. And obviously, he's not like up and coming to Miami, then up and going to Utah or Detroit or whatever.
Well, he was upset about it this week before he got thrown into this trade.
Yeah, exactly. There's a real challenging aspect to that too.
Yeah, especially with kids.
To be able to find like some even footing to just kind of like wrap your mind around. And then of course, obviously like the family aspect of that.
So you mentioned the Jimmy thing. This is a guy that you had finals moments with. You've had a long-standing personal relationship with. It's been a process, I would say, over time. It's finally done. We'll talk about Kevin's Instagram escapades in a second, but
just an all-time run.
Kevin all-time here. But before we get to the IG, you're just kind of like you're feeling now as this process is finally kind of like mercifully, I would say, ended for all parties involved.
Yeah, thank goodness there is a trade deadline because I just felt like this would have just dragged on for forever. I think a big takeaway of mine is the sort of like unfortunate nature of how it all went down. Anybody who's able to look at it objectively and not over emotionally, anybody would say that Jimmy had an incredible stint in Miami. If it wasn't the best basketball of his career, it was damn near. And then not to mention we had a lot of great runs and teams that, I guess overachieved, right? And that's like what we're all trying to do, right? Is overachieve and do something bigger than what people, had set out for. So, I feel like I've been a beneficiary of being his teammate. There've been great moments. There've been challenging moments. That's sort of what you get when you get somebody that's as competitive and spirited as he is. I mean, he's a ruthless competitor for sure. I mean, that was always my takeaway whenever someone asked me, like, what's it like playing with Jimmy, or what's his game like, or what makes him so good? Like, he's the only player that I've seen, or the player who does it the most, where his just like competitive spirit and will is what separates him. Like, you look at his game, it's like, yeah, he has skill. Obviously, he's got good footwork. He's athletic, but he's not like, there's nothing that's like extraordinary about anything that he does other than that, like his competitive spirit and will. So I think I learned a lot, just from, being in the locker room with him and competing with him. I've also, been able to play in some really exciting environments and, fun stages because of him and, what he's been able to do in the playoffs. So, obviously sad to see him go, happy to see him go if that's where he wants to be. Obviously didn't want to be in Miami any longer. So, end of an era, I guess.
Before Kevin presses publish on Instagram, how fast would you get a text?
Have you like seen what he's been on? Like,
it's hilarious.
I have my own version of this. I'm curious your version of this, because he has been dedicated to this, to the point where I was upset that the trade happened last night while you guys were playing, because I think that if you guys had not been, if he had literally not been on the court, he would have ripped it, and he had like a 2-hour delay.
And then the Mike retirement post today was just all time, like cherry on top. Yeah, man. It's been funny to be able to like see it through like the outward facing lens of like social media, but then also like be on the plane next to him and he's like queuing up clips.
Is he like giggling?
He's like, yo, if this happens, I got this saved up. If this happens, he has like all these different pathways that he could take and directions he could take it. But yeah, I was like giving him a hard time. I'm like, yo, you have somebody feeding you clips. Like, there's no way. And he's like really out there, like cutting clips, like thinking like it's pretty much a one-man show.
No, he really values
not have a ghostwriter.
He really values his cinematic knowledge. Like, it's a thing he cares. Yeah, we were at dinner with him last week, and if you challenge him on anything movie-wise, he gets like offended. He'll get more offended on if you challenge him on a movie thing than on a basketball thing.
Yeah, it's actually transcended like just the NBA too. Like, I've had people who don't give a shit about basketball text me and be like, yo, what Kev's doing is crazy. Like, you got to tell Kev, like, we all love what he's doing. I'm like, yo, this is
that's
so
what's
funny.
What I found to be funny about it, which I think is kind of I've never seen before. And again, we may never see this again either. Kind of like this Luka trade, is he was doing this in real time with like what was objectively a pretty toxic situation all around. He gets his teammate, Jimmy and Bernie, are on his side. The team is on his side. The league, I'm assuming, is on his side because they didn't say anything. The head of Instagram is on his side because he's violating all kinds of different things where like anyone else is getting their shit struck for just posting someone's movie clips, but yet his stuff is just... So he managed to like thread this perfect needle to get everybody to like him. And that is just hit after hit.
It's actually impossible to do it.
Yeah, the second you miss, you're off.
Social climate too. Yes. Like... Yeah, you said it well. He thread the needle on that for sure. It was funny to see.
Were there any other things that happened this week that just caught your eye that you feel like there is just going to be impactful?
I think the Fox of San Antonio kind of sparked something there where they recognize that Wemby's development is very fast and that title window could be open for a minute, and it looks like they're going after that kind of relentlessly now. Otherwise, it is a lot of movement. I don't know exactly how it compares to years past, but, a little bit of shuffling. And, I think, obviously there's one part of it where people are kind of getting their lives shuffled around, but, the NBA has faced some criticism this year from fans. And I think this trade deadline definitely offered some form of entertainment.
Yeah. I wonder, obviously one of the headlines of the Luka thing was the looming Supermax. And when you see, obviously guys in the NBA have been making a lot of money for a long time. But where it's going quickly with some of these max players, like getting 80, 85, 70, 75 a year, I do think it used to sort of be every team has, 2, 3 max guys, and you weren't necessarily a superstar or even an all-star or all-NBA. Like that wasn't a prerequisite to be obviously a super max. It is with the all-NBA, but just be a max guy. I'm interested to see if ownership groups and front offices start looking at like who we're giving maxes to even more intentionally, or a little bit more. They're being a little more speculative with who they choose to give a max contract to, because when you talk about how much money that's becoming and how much that ties you up, especially with the new CBA and how it's passed, like I could see, I don't necessarily know that it justifies trading Luka, but ownership groups not wanting to dip into paying that much money.
Yeah, just that high of an investment into
any one player.
And I think the rules of the CBA were actually intended for the opposite purpose. Is to like encourage like homegrown stars and guys, encourage teams to keep their own or facilitate them keeping their own. So that could be an interesting dynamic as it plays out more.